Om Shivaya. Hi YouTube. How you doing today? Noah Richardson back with another Goa Trance review in the Goa Trance umbrella spectrum of music of which I'm talking about. Hi. Today we're going to talk about a group who's still around, have been around since the mid-90s. A group who have done downtempo a little bit differently, at least at first, than your typical downtempo. I'm talking about, oops, there's a glare, the Saafi brothers, or the Saafi brothers, or the Saafi brothers. I just say Saafi brothers, whatever. We're going to talk about Mystic Cigarettes today. Mystic Cigarettes. Now, I said before, this is not like your typical downtempo, and I'll get to why in a moment, but a little bit about Saafi Brothers, Mystic Cigarettes. This album was released in 1997 on Blue Room released, and they were well known for their 3 to 4 LP disc albums. I mean, these guys would if you they put out a lot of great music, a lot of really great music, and it was a little bit expensive. This one is only marked $18.99, which is funny for a 3-disc, but at any rate, I would have paid $30 for it if that's what it costs new, because they're usually around $9 a disc. But Blue Room put out a whole slew of albums that were all, 3 to 4 disc LPs. And anyway, I'll hold that up for a little bit longer. Here's one of them. Saafi Brothers. Who are they? Okay, well, 3 people at the time. Alex Azari, Gabriel Lamar, and Michael Kohlbecker. And I couldn't find a whole lot of info on Alex Azari, so I'm sorry I can't really talk about him. But Gabriel Lamar, I've heard from other projects such as Montauk P, who Michael Kohlbecker was also involved in Montauk P too. And Montauk P had at least 1 or 2 albums on Blue Room. And it wasn't Psytrance, it wasn't Goa either, oddly enough. It was really more like deep, hypnotic, dark techno that was a bit psychedelic, but the psychedelic aspect of it really came out of the hypnotic effect from the very rhythmic nature of it, not necessarily the repetitive nature, which you hear a lot in straight up techno or even trance, but more in that it was almost like an experimental project in terms of, well, how hypnotic can it be without being overtly repetitious? And it worked really well. Michael Kohlbecker was also involved in Eternal Basement, Funf D, Apollo 3D, and again, Montauk P. Eternal Basement had a slew of releases on Heart House, the German label that really was one of the early labels that pioneered like hard trance, hard techno, and even people like Coxbox showed up on Hard House, and they kind of did everything, but mostly the dark, hard trance, hard techno kind of a thing. It was a lot of really cool stuff. I mean, Spice Lab, one of my very favorite people of all time, was on Hard House too, and if we ever get to Spice Lab, we'll talk about him. If you want me to talk about him, put a comment in the thing. I'll talk about Spice Lab. I got a lot to say about Oliver Lee, another pioneer in his own genre, who actually crossed over a bit into well, I wouldn't say a bit, but he definitely crossed over into trance too. So at any rate, Mystic Cigarettes came out in 1997. There was a couple of other remix albums that came out too. I used to have them both, but I still have this one, the Jammin' Unit and the Bandaloo 12-inch, and this is just amazing. I remember the day I bought this, and I had like I was getting near a breakup with my girlfriend at the time or whatever, and I went to the record store and I was like, I'm gonna find something. I'm gonna find something. I'm gonna buy something. I'm gonna feel better. And I found this, and I took it home, and this is just beautiful. Well, I mean, it is. I'm gonna go ahead and just say it. It's beautiful, you know, and it's just you want this particular these particular tracks to go on forever and ever. And I mean, what can I say about this other than, like, if you live in a big city and it's rainy and it's overcast, like in the Pacific Northwest where I used to live, then put this on and you'll see what I mean. You know, like side by side with something like Moby, The Rain Falls and the Sky Shudders, or something like that. But this is fantastic, and it's part of the Internal Code Error remixes, which is the last track on this album. This album, wow, we're talking 10 to 14 minute tracks on this thing. You know, there's 1, 2, 3, there's 6 tracks on the album, and all but one are like 10 to 14 minutes long. I mean, that is just like, if you're going to do ambient, you got to have longer tracks. I mean, if you think about the structure of slower music, at least electronic anyway, you think about how the faster it is, you have, typically you have less to say in a faster song because there's less time in the measures. You know what I mean? To explain the narrative and to really say what you want to say musically. In slower music, you have more time and the same amount of measures. You know, if you're counting, you have more time. So theoretically, you could stuff more musical narrative into longer tracks, and you see that with like Spangle in particular. You know, like the names of the tracks escape me. I'm sorry, but if you have, the point being that if you have slower music, you could theoretically jam more sound and more narrative into there. Is that necessarily what happened with this album? Not really. Not really. I mean, what we've got here are really kind of haunting, very chill out, and your typical kind of Hindustani, Indian influence kind of soundscapes and melodies. But the takeaway from this is that this is ambient that uses hypnotic rhythm to drive it, you know, and you know, if you listen to Montauk P, that's what's going on in Montauk P, are like these very driving hypnotic rhythms. Although it's definitely more dancey, they took that same kind of narrative, you know, that hypnotic rhythm thing, and they put it into an ambient album, and it worked really, really well. I mean, it's very deep. It's a little dark, you know, but it's very ambient and what they call chill out. It's almost kind of groovy in a way, like, you know, like kind of a real mid-tempo 110, 100, maybe even 120 BPM, just sort of, you know, a nice pulsing kind of organic rhythm that could be dancey if you wanted it to be, you know. But also, like, you know, it's not like this uplifting, harmonious, you know, clouds opening and God comes out kind of a thing, you know. This is it's really kind of like dark ambient that's groovy, and these hypnotic rhythms are really the things that really carry it. You know, you could almost say this is like future hippie music. It's like futuristic ambient, you know. It's funny, you know, to harken back to the past and look at things that were futuristic at a time, for its time, and listen to them 20 years later or longer, and realize how well that music actually has held up. You know, and that's what I would call futuristic music. You know, futurism. You know, music that is sort of timeless. You know, it defines the time in which it was created, and then also carries on and preserves that narrative and preserves that timelessness throughout the ages or throughout the years, into the future. So to me, that's what futurism is about. This is not like Spangle. It's not that crazy Sybient thing that they were doing at all. Definitely Spangle had complex rhythms in it. This is way more simple. It's way more toned down. It's almost like what you would expect. It's what you kind of would expect like 90s ambient to be, And whenever I would play down-tempo sets, when I would do DJ sets, I love to play down-tempo I love to play down-tempo sets the most because I feel like those really gave me the freedom to cross genres into one another a bit more effortlessly than I could with like full on or dancey things. It's kind of like a blanket term that I use, for I would throw just about everything in there: chill, breakbeats, IDM, ambient, glitch, avant-garde. I'd put in things like plaid and underworld and orbital and spangle and random tracks from whoever, like Coxbox, and whoever might have like a great ambient track on their album. I might throw a Tom York Radiohead song in there, just to mess with you. Alien, drum and bass, dub, Brotham States, Eamon Tobin, Eat Static, Digitalis, Spice Lab, Electric Sky Church, Juno Reactor. I love doing down tempo. I loved it a lot, because it was, you could throw in a lot of weird, but it wouldn't be like a maddening thumping rhythm all the time. You could go in at one thing and carry it into another thing and have a bridge that's something weird and then do something else. At any rate, I mean I can't stress enough that the hypnotic rhythms, there's beats in this album, very slow, but I mean the hypnotic rhythms in this album carry it so well that a 14-minute track feels like an 8-minute track, because you're just sucked into this down tempo groovy rhythm, they slowly build, and it almost like it just kind of creeps up on you, I mean, listen to Montauk P and listen to these guys, who's more of the star of the show here, Cole Becker or Lamar? I don't know. Maybe Cole Becker, maybe both of them together. Typically, from what I've heard of theirs, that when they work together, they seem to play off each other really well, and you kind of can't tell who's doing what. But at any rate, this one is amazing. Another one that I got at Frequency 8 in San Francisco. So thank you, F8, for that. They had another album that came out in 2000 that does a similar thing that this does, but it's way more Indian music driven and kind of melodic, and it's not bad. I found myself liking particular tracks here and there more than the album as a whole, and it's not a bad album, but just with I don't want to say a lot, but several acts that were making music at the time, their first seminal album was always, or the breakout album was always like the one that they never went back to, or else if they did, they went back to it in some ways on another album that just did it a whole lot better. But at any rate, I really love this album a lot. It's great. I can't stress enough that there hasn't really been a whole lot of this really kind of dark, ambient, hypnotic, rhythmic, ambient down-tempo that's present on this album. So this is Saafi Brothers, Mystic Cigarettes. Check this out if you haven't heard it. And of course, a thank you to everybody who's listened and who supports me or thinks I'm an idiot. Whichever is the case, I am cool with that. At any rate, Blue Room released. What is the catalog number? Let's see, 32. So by 97, this is the 32nd album or release that they've probably album that they released, and they cranked out a lot of music, and maybe one day I'll talk about Blue Room as a whole. So at any rate, I'll catch you later, and I'll see you next time.